Hello, and welcome to another episode of Super Pros Bros. I'm Player 1 Ike, and with me as always is...
Player 2, Eli. And, Han Brolo, did you know that this podcast is available on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify?
I did not, Brobafett. Are those the same places they could...
Like?
Comment?
Share?
And subscribe.
Yeah, it sure is.
That's awesome, man.
Just wonderful.
So, what we got on the old Dacarino this week?
Well, we're gonna take a look at stuff and wonder, should this matter to me? How does this affect me? What I just watched.
What does it even mean? So, earlier this week, there was a video that was put out by the wonderful Thomas Flight titled, Martin Scorsese Said I Was Wrong. Going to likely put that in the description. And the video talked about an experience that that content creator had about making a video, drawing meaning from certain works by Martin Scorsese, which Martin Scorsese called out as being just incorrect. That's not what he intended with his product. However, that does and doesn't matter, and we're going to get into that this week.
Because we are the arbiters now.
Yes. Martin Scorsese, psh, you don't know anything about your own thing.
Move over, slouch.
You old fuddy-duddy.
So, we're going to quickly add a little asterisk to what has meaning, because there are a few different ways you can kind of interpret things from art, be it a book, be it a movie, be it a show.
And I think there's also, within these, there's two types of meaning. Should we cover those first or shove those after?
Sure. There can be more overt meaning that is more likely intended, and oftentimes a writer or creator will have a theme in mind, and it's deliberate. Or you can have unintended stuff that can just happen, and consequences or themes can arise just from good storytelling because, well, trends and historical things often repeat themselves, and it's easy to see and correlate or infer meaning from said trends. Easy one, teamwork helps solve problems. You know, easy. You see it everywhere. It's not like hard to infer, and easy to accidentally inject at stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't necessarily written with that intent. So the way we've broken it down is that the three types of meaning are character meaning, personal meaning, and societal meaning. So character meaning is as it pertains to the story at hand. So how does the character or characters involved feel about something? And how does it contribute to their growth? And what does it mean for their development or their continued story? Personal meaning is what does it mean to the audience? How does it impact us? How does it resonate with us? And societal meaning is what does it mean in terms of a global or less individual narrative?
Let's talk about the creator's intention versus something that happens accidentally. How does that kind of sit with you? Do you have any strong feelings on that kind of concept of unintended versus intended meaning?
Yes, but for a very particular reason.
Hit me.
So, and this comes largely because I like analyzing human behavior. I was a psychology student. I like how people think. It's something I'm naturally good at. Mm-hmm. So, one of the ones that I hate and that drives me nuts, and inferred meaning that people get is off of the tiny details if there's no pattern. And what I mean by that is, like, if you were to say that someone is childish in a story because they choose to drink hot chocolate instead of coffee, fuck you. People are allowed to drink hot chocolate. They're allowed a one-off drink. They maybe go, I want something fucking sweet today, not something bitter and gross.
You don't think, though, in a scene like let's create a fictitious scene where you've got like a la Mississippi Burning or something like that. You've got 6 FBI agents together, sure, and all of them order coffee, and one of them orders hot chocolate. Given the kind of societal meta that is set up, that generally speaking, the people that order hot chocolate are children, you don't think there can be an inference made there, or that it is kind of foolish or without as much weight? I think
you should always give something twice, at least. And the reason
so if they order it twice, it's fine, or
Or another thing to indicate that general theme. So if you want to infer, using our FBI example, that somebody is a little more childish or has some bizarre childlike quirks to them, give something else to corroborate that. Mm-hmm. Again, reading into a one-off, I get that you don't have tons of time, especially in a movie or a short or something, to designate qualities to characters, and you have to allow for some audience inference, sure, but you can add a secondary little note to that effect,
okay, you can corroborate that evidence.
Yeah, you can have him wearing a fucking charm bracelet or some shit. You can just have some other little detail,
a candy necklace.
Sure, there's other little ways you can inject the same kind of general meaning, or just have an excuse to show something more than once. I don't like when you get when you're basically you have to try and make an inference off of a single data point. Mm-hmm. I don't like it because it doesn't give your characters room to do anything different without it, because then you have to just be assigning meaning to everything, mm-hmm. even if it's just once. I think this is more pertinent for novels or more long-form stuff.
Why so?
Because you have more time.
Okay.
Especially side characters in a movie. You maybe get half an hour of screen time or something. Mm-hmm. So it's you don't get a ton of time, but it's even just little nods, little visual cues, I think is enough. I just hate when people make inferences off of one thing. Another easy one is and that you see a lot, I think is often done well, is looking at PTSD in shows and seeing the kind of dramatic toll that it takes on people.
Okay.
So I'm gonna reference Arcane for this. So okay. Mild spoilers. Jinx is super fucked up, and they keep harking back to it in really quick ways. Because she loses everything, functionally, and they keep having little echoes, little whispers in the back of her head. You keep getting those little glimmers that it is not gone, it's not okay, and if it's not omnipresent, you get multiple data points to know, it's not just a one-time thing, it's not just extreme stress that evokes it, it's whenever she's alone, mm-hmm. she goes a little nuts, and she's volatile, she sees anybody similar to her sister, she goes fucking nuts. So you get cued in. Not long data points. Mm-hmm. Very quick. But you get more than one.
Yeah, but multiple so that that there's some amount of consistency and...
Yep.
Yeah. It's not just if you were gathering data for a mathematical determination, this wouldn't a one-off would be considered an outlier in most circumstances.
Yep.
Where 3+ you can establish a pattern.
Yep.
And especially if it's a constant where it always in X scenario Y always exists.
Uh-huh. I like having that trend because it also makes it leaves less to that question, and I think this is done well for good character writing when it's deliberate. I think is when it's most evident.
So that's your opinion on 1 versus 3 of experiences, intended or otherwise. But what is your take on, and I agree with you, by the way, for the most part. I think there are some situations where a one-off, you can draw a fair inference, just especially if there's been a pattern, if he's always had coffee and then he has hot chocolate, especially if the characters talk about it, or there's a little bit more, especially in film, there's a little bit more kind of focus on it. I think you can make inferences, but I agree that it is definitely weaker than one that is, has multiple opportunities of pointing.
Yeah.
The next one I kind of want to talk about is, what do you think of when author, because there's so much talking to, creators these days, whether they are directors, musicians, artists, whoever, where they're able to talk and have their work kind of clarified. What do you think of when an artist says they meant X, but everybody read it as Y, or stuff like that. What is your take on the intended versus unintended meaning of something in art by the artist?
So, I think that largely starts to change, and you get that kind of thank you, laundry. You get that kind of difference in viewpoint based on personal experience. So what I mean by that is like me trying to write a soldier authentically is if I had an actual soldier sit down and write about being a soldier, is like it's not gonna fucking line up. It's not gonna have the same one for one. So I think however someone writes something is largely colored by their own lens of experience, and so I think that can lead to a difference in interpretations. So if someone has a more niche experience with something and they're writing to what they know, and the wider public doesn't recognize it or isn't familiar with it, it can skew some interpretations. I also think that people probably write or just put shit in because they think it sounds cool or makes sense to them. They don't even necessarily think about it.
Yeah, they don't like examine their own work for potential interpretations. They just examine it for content and how it makes them feel.
Yeah, content, continuity, and whether or not it works.
Yeah.
Like, so I mean, there's also a certain point where, like, I think when you've written a character and you get invested, they are kind of organic.
Mm-hmm.
And so what might have been, anecdotally, what might have been their original trajectory changes.
Yep.
And then who they are can just kind of be different. So while you may have started with a plan in mind, it is subject to change, I think. I think that kind of rigidity is not in any creator's best interest, because it's less natural.
Sure. So it sounds like you're on team art is art. It can mean whatever you want it to be regardless of what the creator intended.
Within reason. Like, you have to have... I feel like you need to be able to make an easy one-to-one or have a justifiable argument for what you mean. And I think...
Sure.
I think if it's something super personal to you or reminds you of something... I think a lot of people, like, it will remind them of someone. Like, it's very easy to draw that kind of parallel in stuff. Like, oh, I recognize one with those character traits, or, I think...
I guess what I mean to say is, like, for instance, let's take it to the hyper dramatic.
Sure.
With what was Catcher in the Rye.
Okay.
Guy writes it, national classic. People read it one way, and fucking crap. Who's the guy? Oh, I need to look this up. Mark David Chapman reads it another way and thinks it's instructions to kill John Lennon. Obviously, this is a hyperbole of an example, because I don't think either of us side with him or think that is even remotely reasonable for reading a book. Is like, oh yes, it's instructions to go kill him, like an artist.
No.
But, in other ways, there are times where people will read stuff and, it's kind of conflicting. There's the fantastic South Park episode, Scrody McBoogerballs, where, it's written with no intention than to be foul and offend the city of South, or not even offend the people, because it was written for them. It's not actually written for anybody else.
It's meant to be disgusting.
It's meant to be disgusting, and the boys find it hilarious. And I think there's actually, I'm gonna make a call that the intention of that is the purity that is art, is making something for yourself that you find awesome for whichever reason. Like, the boys are literally doing the most artistic process that's ever shown in the show, which is just sitting down, having fun, creating their thing. I would like to say I think that's a stand-in for Matt Parker and Matt Parker, Trey Stone?
I don't remember.
Matt and Trey. I think that is their stand-in for themselves, is because I think that's like they would be making South Park if they like in their free time. I would bet money, because I mean this was a college project and this was something that they just enjoy doing, and they find this shit hilarious. Like they made a musical, and I'll bet if it flopped, they still would have been happy they made it. So like I think this is like a stand-in for them. That's my hot take, as hot as it is. But I mean, like, that's kind of artistic purity, right? Is like making something for the experience of making it, enjoying just the process of making the thing. But the rest of the rest of the episode goes on. The book gets found out and it gets published, and everybody gives it all this like ridiculous credit and credence,
crazy
that
accolades
is
and shit.
crazy accolades, and just infer £1,000,000 of everything from this just disgusting story that they can't help but vomit when reading.
I love that episode.
Episode's great.
Episode's
but
phenomenal.
I mean, what I'm kind of like, I'm gonna circle back around here, is that like, you know, who's to say, you know, what it means? Obviously, there are stronger arguments and weaker arguments based upon, you know, data to back it up. But if both sides have, you know, aren't just coming from the hip and just saying, well, this is the way it made me feel, which is valid, but like doesn't have as much like argumentative stance to it.
All right. So I think the biggest and most egregious examples of this are classic literature and this kind of crazy notion that I think both of us had to deal with in high school, which is basically that art has to have meaning to it, which is poppycock. Art can mean fucking dog shit. Literally or metaphorically. It doesn't have to mean a goddamn thing. Like you said, it is all about... Art is an emotional response. I think, largely, it should not have meaning. At best, it's a fucking allegory. Case in point, District 9 clearly has an allegory, and it is allegorical to the internment camps of the Japanese. Like, I believe the director has said as much. There's a lot of easy historical implications and correlations.
But that is like your inference to make too. Like you can easily just not see that, and
yeah,
like I would argue you can say you're missing something. You can also say you're not missing anything. It just kind of depends how you like enjoy or envision like the best viewing process or whatever.
Right.
But that is still an inference that is to be made, and it's also only to be made based upon information that you could or could not have been like subject to, which is interesting. Like if you don't know, you know, some guy reads this from a foreign planet and just sees this as a story, he's not going to know that inference, and the story still stands upon its own.
Correct. And I think that you can have very, very, very broad themes or very specific allegories. And what I mean by that are the easiest ones to do, I think, are societal problems. Easy candidate is like the effects of global warming or like pending environmental disaster. You don't have to look too far to find modern stories that it's like kind of that warning of like
Game of Thrones.
You know, or the things like classism, huge sweeping societal issues that like if you read the news for 5 minutes you're like, oh Jesus Christ.
Squid Game,
thank you, perfect. You don't have to look far to go, interesting. Where it becomes, it's very interesting that you see it often reflected as a kind of timestamp of when things are written. And what I mean by that is, like, because I always love referencing the fucking Expanse. We're going to look at the Expanse. There's a lot of its governmental, like, discord does have some kind of correlation to modern governmental discord. Because one of the big points of conflict is between different sects of society and belters always feeling like they're somehow lesser and being prejudiced against. It's an allegory for racism. And like they basically call it out as much. Because they talk about, at one point, Amos talks about being part of your tribe. and now humans basically are always making it and always keeping to their own. And it's like, okay, cool. And again, it stands regardless. The story stands its own. You don't have to make that kind of inference for the story to be good, or for it to feel inorganic. That's I think that's the key part, is when you're adding and injecting meaning into something, and it doesn't make sense or feels inorganic. The biggest fucking offender of this is Moby Dick. Jesus Christ. I don't know why the fuck Evan wants to make this book more than it is. Herman Melville's story is garbage. I'm gonna throw that one out there. That's my spicy take of the fucking day. Story's dog shit. It reads like a fucking... God, it reads like...
Stardate.
I'm trying to like...
I have moved in with a savage.
Yeah, like... It reads like an obituary. It's terrible. And people want to put all this fucking nutso meaning to it. For example, one thing that I got spoon-fed and told repeatedly is that the Pequod, the boat they're on, is a fucking allegory for the fucking planet Earth with all the different like races of people on it. Oh, shut the fuck up. It's things like that. It's that wildly injected, like... It's when people are reading into stuff that if you push and ask why, it gets weird. Mm-hmm. Like, why is the Pequod an allegory for humans as a race on planet Earth? Well, because they're different. It couldn't be just because dock workers are poor and they just kind of shove them onto a boat to get rid of them? Because the whiteys in fucking England don't want to go work on a boat to hunt whales to get fat for their fucking lamps? Couldn't be that. No, it just makes sense. You don't want to fucking shovel immigrants onto a boat because Britain was historically racist as shit. Of course they do. Like, there's no meaning to this. It's just kind of what happened at the time.
So, I think one of the things you're talking about here is the idea, especially educational systems institutionalizing meaning as a requirement of reading. Yes. And that there is a right and a wrong inference to make. And this is like one of the spots where... I disagree with you. I don't think it's the best allegory, but I can see the point. And I think this is where it depends if you're the teacher or if you're the student. Because I think as a student, if I'm going to write a paper and I make that point, I don't think it should be adopted by everyone, but I think I should like get points for that, that kind of inference. I think that like seeing that meaning, I think is showing that I read the book well and that I understand historical relevance, or that, I can see imagery or whatever. I don't think it's like going to hold a lot of water, but I think you're completely fine as a viewer to read that and go, oh, this thing. But very much kind of like I kind of view hot takes like that as, a conspiracy theory. It's something that if somebody would be like, okay, you wouldn't be like, oh no, this makes complete sense. Like, you shouldn't put on a tinfoil hat and go marching around saying that, but you can have that thought and express it to people and have them go, huh, I don't know if I see it that way. And then just go, yeah, okay. And then just move on with your life and just realize that you've got some different ideas. I think that's completely valid. What, however, is not valid, and that we both agree on, is no teacher should tell you definitively X means Y. There's no fucking, like, it's so unartistic. It's so un-American, in my opinion. Just like, it's so bullshit to be like, okay, I see X. It has, even if it has some, even if you can like write a paper that is going to hold water, be like, this is why it's X. You are completely allowed to have that belief. And I can see why you think that and think other people should, but you shouldn't be tested on it as if it's like
a definite,
yeah, indisputable fact. Like 100%. This is a strong opinion you have. It's kind of like religious beliefs. You can, all these people believed it before you and after you. There's some, potential, historical things or other people like can corroborate events. It's like, cool. It's not factual. You do not have proof.
No.
And even if the artist said as much, that's one person's interpretation of this. And I think this is where you and I agree again, is that art is this kind of like living thing that even if the artist, like if somebody came and after they read your book and had a different, asked you what like your kind of like if you had any themes or imagery or like kind of hidden messages in there, and you said yes and this is what these were, and they go, oh, I didn't get that, I got this, would you assert that 2 degrees, obviously like one person can have more evidence than the other, but 2 degrees you are both correct?
I think it largely depends. I think if they say something that I perceive as completely fucking batshit, but like, no. but like I think
but that's what I mean by a series of degrees. Like obviously you are, I hate using this, but more right, or your standpoint has more
better
evidence.
Insight.
Yeah, but I mean it just has more evidence.
Yeah.
It's not like neither are empirical. Yeah. They are both kind of, to use from your universe, flobby wobby sclibby dooby truth.
Sure.
I was paraphrasing Doctor Who there as poorly as I could.
Wibbly wobbly.
Yeah, wibbly wobbly truth. They are both like this.
So
like kind of ethereal, floaty, celestial, like whoa stuff. Neither of them are like hard, firm, tangible. Yeah.
The only thing that I would say you could maybe be fairly definite about is kind of impact of events on characters. If that makes sense.
It doesn't. Please expound.
Okay. For example, so going back to personal meeting, I'm gonna yoink one of my own examples, because fuck it.
Sure.
One of my characters in my web serial is super plucky. Like he always had a grin, always like his number one defense mechanism is humor.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is just who he is. His parents have basically abandoned him, but he just laughs it off, and he's fine, and laugh it off, it'll be good. And he is taken, and he is put in a box, basically. He's put in a tube.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first time he wakes up, he has this thing under his skin that is basically the source of his superpower that can bolster single muscles at a time. Okay. So he can have one arm be really strong for just a split second to hit someone, or his legs can bolster so he can jump super high and like quick fixes.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically bolsters his liver and wakes him up because it metabolizes what they're sedating him with. So he wakes up having people cutting into him to fish the thing out.
Yeah.
Yeah, have fun. And then proceeds to get absolutely battered by my main antagonist, Zelig, who he can't fight him. He's no chance. He's just a bigger, stronger, badder version. And he basically almost dies. Not like someone bails him out, because he's almost died a couple times. Like, you're fighting other super-powered people. It's gonna happen, inevitability. But it's like, there's no bailing.
Mm-hmm.
He's alone. And he's going to die alone, as far as he can see it. And he doesn't. And it breaks him. He is no longer the same character. He is fundamentally different.
Mm-hmm.
So I think things like that, like when there are fundamental shifts in a character, you can't just be like, oh, they're the same guy. Like, there's certain points where you'd be like, no, that is demonstrably wrong. Like, you could say there's still parts of Parasite that are left intact. Sure. Like, there's echoes of who he used to be. You cannot say he is fundamentally the same. Like, there are things like that, I think, in stories that are kind of indisputable.
Yeah. But I mean, like, again, that's like a tangible thing.
Yes.
Like you're arguing, like, literally plot points. You're not arguing. Yeah. And I want to, before we go any further, when I say that there are, like, they're basically just, your own truth, but with more, kind of argument material, there is a definite importance to intention, especially in regards to what the artist is creating. Even if that's not what we see, it does matter what you intend to do, mostly in a negative or positive way. Like, if you are if I go out today and write something crazy racist that nobody interprets as being racist because I do it in this artistic way and I'm a genius, and I write this like horrible thing that is intended to just make all, I don't know, Asians feel like crap or something like that, and it's just like this smear piece, but nobody reads it that way. I'm still an asshole, just nobody else knows it. And controversially, if I write something that is super well-meaning, and the way it just gets picked up by the general public, obviously there are certain, there are exceptions to the rule here. I don't want to accidentally stand on top of something that I didn't know existed. But just by and large, if I go out and write something that was meant to be good and meant to bring everybody together, but the way people read it is if it is, a smear campaign against the whole Asian race, that I am this huge douchebag. Yeah. It does matter that I meant to write something good and with all good intentions. That does matter. And it is really finicky to, kind of suss and deal with that. But that is, I think, something that is, regardless of the way you read something, it is important to look at why somebody wrote something. Like, for instance, and I know you hate this, and most of the world hates this, it is important to look at, the, is it? Shit. It's two book series that we both hate. One's vampires, one's BDSM.
Twilight
and 50 Shades. So both of those were meant to bring some amount of pleasure and joy to their reader groups. And I think the latter was written expressly for fun. I think it was basically, right? I think 50 Shades comes from Twilight fanfic or something like that. I think there's some through line there. I
don't know, but there's be totally
some
surprised.
Connection between one. I don't remember which order it went. Either way, they were both meant well, and that really does matter. And it kind of makes, especially 50 Shades, a lot worse. Because Twilight, look, if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. I don't think that one, I haven't read that one, so I can't say if it's bad or not. I've heard it's not the best. But also, it was meant for teenage girls. It wasn't meant to be looked at by, as many adults as have read it and called it dog shit. That's not who it was meant for. It wasn't the intended audience. And that also does matter. It's pretty clear the way it was marketed, the way it was written, who it was meant for. So that, there are important things to take into account when and before shitting all over something. And same with 50 Shades. It was meant for a certain demographic that definitely wasn't me. I think it still is very problematic for different reasons, but the intention does matter. When it was, both of those were projects of love from their creators. They weren't things that were put together by some previously very well published artist who was just looking to make a buck and saw an opportunity. These were both projects of love, and that really does make a difference, at least for me.
I'm gonna add a big fucking caveat.
Just the. Hit me with the caveat.
Here's my big caveat. Twilight. I'm just gonna fucking shake my head because I hear some of the plot points in Twilight, and I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ. I wouldn't leave that one alone.
When's the last time you've been a 14-year-old girl who's
we're just gonna chalk it up to shitty storytelling, and we're gonna leave it there. You're allowed to tell bad stories. It's not a crime. Anyway. 50 Shades, however. If you're gonna write that much about a very, very specific topic, it's not like there's an allusion to the characters enjoying BDSM. Nah, fam. There's no pretending. Motherfucker, do a modicum of research.
Oh, I agree that I'm not in any way condoning what happened. I'm saying it does make a difference, though. Like, if this was somebody who
in
was...
a way, it almost makes it more insulting.
So, if this was my understanding, and maybe I'm just wrong, but my understanding is that this is, like, one of their early, if not first, works that got published. So, to blame somebody who wrote something kind of for themselves and for, like, a fandom when it got published and being like, yo, what the fuck? It's like, yeah, that's not what they didn't think this was going to happen. They were just doing this for them. Like, you know, it's kind of like the Scrody McBoogerballs thing. It's like, if you write for something for yourself and it ends up getting picked up and published, that's really cool. But then you can't also be like, yo, what the fuck? Why did you do this for these people? It's like, because I didn't write it for any of you assholes. I wrote it for me and my friends. Like, you can't, to look at that and not understand the circumstance and not see where they were coming from, I think really does, you're just going to end up you're going to end up doing what we hated of literary teachers doing and making obvious through lines that aren't obvious, that don't, like, exist, that you are fabricating because you feel strongly. It's like, that's not how that works. Should they have done research? Should the editor have been like, yo, maybe we should do some research on this? Fucking absolutely. The editors the printing house should be held somewhat accountable, for sure, especially for the first one. After that, yeah, you can start placing blame because it's like, okay, you knew you were writing this, you got hate mail, you probably should have done some research. That's definitely on you. But book one, like, I think that's a little bit more not their fault.
I'll and that's totally fair. People do deserve the benefit of the doubt. People do deserve to not be just fucking hate blasted for composing something in ignorance. That's fair. Like, my only frustration, I guess, is if you're doing something that is, like, founded in realism. Come on.
Yeah, they should have done research before it got published. Somebody should have said something. But I really do think, this is an often assumption, if this was this person's first work, which I believe it was, they really aren't to be held accountable. That's the editing house's choice to be like, yo, let's just take it and print it. It's like, you guys should have done some, like, whoever was the editor should have been like, But to not, I think, is kind of on them. The second time, definitely everybody's fault. Each person should have done something because everybody knew at that point. Because it's not like they printed the first one and then immediately printed the second one. I'm sure it was read. A lot of people said good things, and plenty of people, I'm sure, said, dude, what the fuck? And nobody listened.
For sure.
So, I'm wondering if there's anything else to talk about, because I think we're kind of getting to the ending thread category. There's been one of the things that, and I guess I can include this video if I can find it, that is interesting to me, and I'm kind of curious to get your take on it, although I think I know where it's going to be coming from. Mm-hmm. There was an interview with Childish Gambino, a.k.a. Donald Glover, who, as far as I know, we are both quite big fans of. And this was after his fantastic music video, This Is America, came out and kind of destroyed the internet for a week or two. And in an interview, somebody was like, hey, what does this mean? Because they wanted to get, the author's input. They wanted to get, like, straight from the source, the truth, or, the closest thing that
you're getting to it, sure.
And his response is so, in my opinion, artistically reserved, powerful, and smart. Is he just asked the reporter, well, what did you think of it? Like, what do you think it means? And they, they gave their 5-second quip so that they could get back to their question before their time was up or whatever. Yeah. And he goes, cool. He doesn't go, doesn't go yes, doesn't go no, goes, cool. And then moves on. And lets the art speak for itself and doesn't explain it, doesn't tell what he meant, just lets it exist.
That is a ballsy power play.
Right?
I do actually, I have one thing I want to add, kind of harking back to a point about a classic literature and the kind of injected meaning. Because I had a thought. One of those brain babies people are telling me about. And there's kind of a sense of this is going to sound weird, just roll with me for a minute. There's this kind of sense of, like, intellectual elitism and, like, classicism that comes along with a lot of education. And what I mean is that, like, things are revered because of their age. For example, like, everyone fucking knows what Moonlight Sonata is. Right? Like, it's a...
Huh? What you talking about?
What are you talking about? Like, there's a lot of old music that is given this just aura of reverence because of the virtue of its existence for so long. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is revered simply because it's age. And, like, there's a lot of stuff that is super revered now that wasn't even fucking popular when the author was alive. Like, it wasn't a popular work. And there became this kind of... There's this kind of note and trend to a degree where, like, it's almost like the education system is kind of hipster in a way. That they're like Moby Dick was not a popular book. And again, for good reason, it reads like a fucking obituary. It's terrible. I will stand on this. I will die on this hill. But you know, it's taught like it's some fucking revolutionary work. Like, and then you got shit like Great Gatsby, which I think is actually a fine book, and it's just kind of demonized in some ways. It's forever ruined for me because of, like, fucking 10th grade English. It was like, oh, this stuff has a meaning, and I'm like, it's a fucking sign. Like, he's an optometrist. Jesus Christ. Gatsby just slept with everyone. Good God. The man's a whore. Anyway.
Not Gatsby.
But you don't see that kind of treatment given to modern literature, even though there's plenty of, like, modern literature that's still really... Like, Charles Dickens is like, forever in that place of reverence. Motherfucker was not popular for most of his life. Like, but he's just kind of revered now because... reasons. Like... I think that a lot of people... It's this kind of inferred reverence that has just sort of been ascribed and hasn't necessarily been earned to a degree. Like, I think in some ways we should probably pay more respect to a lot of more popular stuff, because it's like there's a reason things get popular. I would argue music is kind of a weird art in a way because auditory cues for the human brain, very simple. There's a lot of pop songs that are the same fucking 5-chord progression that you're just like, at this point we're programmed to go "Mrr," and react to.
The same thing with movie posters. Every movie poster will have 2 colors on it.
Orange
and blue 99% of the time, because it draws the human eye like fucking moth to a flame. Like, you cannot help but look at it. That's why if you look at every single one, that's why all the Marvel ones are designed the exact fucking same. There's a year where all the blockbusters had like the exact same design. I don't know what artist got paid bank for a year and made them all, but I swear to God it's the same artist. It has to be.
In a mansion built of other smaller mansions. And I think we're less programmed to be geared towards the same thing in terms of books, in terms of comics, in terms of
story material. Storied fiction.
Because it's a lot more than just auditory cues. Not that there's anything wrong with pop music, but make something new. But like
pop music, I mean, like, as much as I agree that pop music is woof, a lot of like the same sound machine just grabbing us by the ears and making us listen. It still is very good.
It still works.
Like, the farther back you look at pop music, you will understand and appreciate how far we've come. It's fucking amazing these days.
No,
it still is. There is still plenty of it that is just like, fabricated art. It very much is just like, built in a lab, which is a little sad, but we're getting that sweet, sweet synthetic pop, yo.
It's true.
Straight into the vein brain.
Just put it in me. But yeah, I think that more stuff that is popular from a storytelling standpoint, or from a story standpoint, deserves more credit. Like, and shouldn't just be like dismissed because, well, it was popular. It's like it.
So like, you're on Team Edward now.
You ever lick my balls? But things like, I mean, I think it deserves to be analyzed and fucking shithoused. But I think things like Squid Game deserve the clout and credit they receive. Like, it was good enough to be a fucking global phenomenon. It wasn't a fluke.
Yeah.
Even if
same with Arcane too.
Same with Arcane. Like, even though, like, we both agree that the kind of back 3 episodes of Squid Game kind of fucking tripped a bit.
Yup.
Yeah, like, neither of us are like, well, that show was fucking garbage.
Yeah.
Like, it's still good. It still has a very clear story and a very powerful message behind it. Like,
Yep.
I mean, it was fucking powerful enough to cause riots and fucking... Not riots, like protests in Seoul. Like, goddamn. So...
Art influencing the masses.
Yeah,
So
like,
before we move on, there's a clip I got reminded of that I found of Jordan Peele talking about theories about his first great, in my mind, masterpiece, Get Out, where people are talking about, oh, this because of that. And there's some of them that are right, and he talks about them. And there's others, and this is a man who is a true blue artist, is in love with horror. Like, he unabashedly loves horror. He's very funny, but he also is
so weird that he got to start in comedy. It fucking throws me off.
Yeah. But loves horror movies, and is a great writer, and, wrote that fantastic piece, created it, I believe directed it, and it's just like, you can see the times where it's like, oh yeah, they're on the money. And, it's like, yeah, that's what I intended. And there's other times people are reading into it. And it's like, his response isn't, you're an idiot. It's just like, there's one of them that somebody does this like insane deep dive on, oh, because this and that, and like this imagery. And Jordan Peele's response is, yeah. It's like so great. It's exactly what that is. It's just like, you are allowed this thing. I didn't see that. I didn't intend for that. I'm glad you got that from this. You have that moment. Yeah, sure. And it's just like, it's so... I honestly think that's kind of just like what this is at the end of the day. It's just like, everybody can get what they want. Sometimes it was meant. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was unseen. There's one of them that it's like, this idea... it tracks, and this guy looked up and like has evidence, but also, what the fuck? Like, who would have thought of that other than you librarian skullfucker? Like, what the hell? Like, how does your brain work like that? It's so cool, and you're so insane. It's so amazing. And these are all going to be linked.
Get some help.
Doobly-doo. Yeah, get some help. Speaking of getting some help, perhaps we'd like to get some help from our advertisers, unless you have something to tag on, or...
No, I think I've yammered enough on this.
Advertisers, ho!
Have you ever wanted to feel some mainstream appeal as a nerd? Have you wanted to indulge in a little bit of power fantasy? Do you love when the good guy wins in the end, and most things wrap up with a nice little bow on top? Might I interest you in some comic book movies? With them tasty comic book movies, you get the first grade moral lessons with explosions and punches, punctuation to emphasize. Add in some clear expectations of who's your villain versus who is our hero, and you found yourself a winning formula that will undoubtedly appeal to the masses. So what are you waiting for? Go embark on that hero's journey to get the MacGuffin. It's coming to a theater near you this summer.
And we are back. Eli, do you got a pitch this week?
Yeah, I have a very odd niche. I don't know what I ate, what I drank, or what I took. I was walking around my apartment this week and had kind of a thought of like this sort of modern society. I guess kind of a magic equivalent of steampunk. If that makes any sense. Roll with it.
Rolling.
But most of the government is driven by what's called the Academy. And the Academy is basically governed by mages. So they in turn run society, and it's run by 2 headmasters who are functionally ageless.
Yeah.
And they have been, driving humans toward progress and towards the greater good, or their version of it, for centuries. Like they're old as shit. They're old as dirt, and they still look like they're 40. And so the main character
1000 is the new 40.
Yeah, exactly. So the main character is too curious for her own good, and learns about, and she in the courtyard of the academy, the main campus of it, because it is still a school to some degree. There are the 3 headmasters. So she wonders what happened to the other one. And he died just short of a century ago. And he is reportedly the guy who is credited with the abolishment of aging for the other 2 headmasters. And curious about, like, she gets kind of interested into the idea of why aren't more people ageless than just the headmasters? And their initial accreditation is, well, because the secrets were lost with him, and he didn't share it with us, which she goes, that seems kind of bunk. And so she goes to go see the guy who killed him, who killed the other headmaster, because he's still alive. And he still looks like he's 30. Even though he's 94. Because he's being kept alive to go insane. That's their punishment for him.
Okay.
And he starts introducing her to the idea that all things have to end because the headmasters don't see people as people anymore. To them, they're just ants. And he was a prodigy supposed to join them, and they saw his ambition as too reckless, and when he viewed them as inhuman. And so the main character has to decide who they want to help and whether they return back to the quiet life of dignity or potentially upset the apple cart on everything because this crazy dude in the cell might be onto something and might be the most genuine person she's talked to.
I love that notion of crazy is the most sane that happens in like these kind of like conspiracy like novels. It's such a cool paradigm. It really is, like, because it's like one of those ones that you can kind of it mirrors so much of reality, especially when like looking now what we know like about our governments and stuff like that. It's just like, oh, this is uncomfortably accurate about other things in my life.
It's fine.
It's really cool.
Everything's fine. It's fine.
Well, if I may move away from the disturbingly but awesomely, I'm very excited to read that, but disturbingly kind of crazy notion to one a lot more pedantic. My pitch this week is what I am very aptly calling Breaktime. This isn't so much a story as much as it would be a project. The idea was like one of my favorite things occasionally I would see this in films or in like YouTube videos is people talking about something that I knew a little bit about, but not a lot in passing. Like I remember, I think I was at like a diner or something like that. And I was sitting behind a group of people. I couldn't even tell you their profession. It might have been firefighters, it might have been cops, they might have been, deep oil drillers. I don't remember. But listening to them talk about, not about work, but like having that, like that post work or, lunchtime talk about the bullshit that's happening at work, where occasionally they talk about work itself, but a lot of it is them just talking about bullshit and just chatting and occasionally sharing a story. I found that to be so like filling this kind of like cathartic spot in like my brain of like being at like the funnest times in my experience at work is when you're on break chatting with other people about bullshit that happens and stuff you understand. But it's just that, that back and forth, that kind of rigmarole of chatting about that asshole over there that did this dumb thing. Oh, yeah. There's something so soothing about that. And I thought it'd be kind of a fun anthology series to do is like each episode is 20-30 minutes. I think the best way to do it would be to go around to different workplaces potentially, or talk to people from work and just like stories and stuff like that, or like record a break room for a day and just kind of synthesize that down to like the good bits or the ones that hit best or whatever, and probably write it up as a script, maybe have the same people read it back, maybe have people watch the footage and then act, I don't know, but just kind of have that and get to give that experience to people who don't get to have that at their job for whatever reason, or retired, or get to see that and just enjoy that occupational just tedium in all of its like glory.
Man, I'm just thinking about weird shit that I talked about coworkers with when I was working at the shelter.
Right? Yeah. There's so many great stories that people have, and so many like I think it's kind of hard to remember how great those moments are outside of the moment. Like a couple days after they pass, unless they are all-timers, they're just kind of gone to the annals of your memory. But in that moment, it's so pure and it's so unfettered. It's not, I mean, like usually, at least with guys, because I usually work with men, there is like this element of trying to one-up each other, which is kind of funny in its own way when telling stories, and usually leads to great stories. Yeah. But it's so, if somebody's having a hard day, you listen. If somebody has a problem, you instruct. But a lot of the time, it's just like people venting and talking about shit that's annoying. And it's not like a bummer. Like if you come home from work and your significant other's just there and they had a hard day, you need to listen and be caring and be there for them. And sometimes they need a little bit of input, but a lot of time they just need to get this bullshit that they couldn't tell anybody off their chest. But that's what it's like in a workplace, except it's like this shared fuck that guy, fuck that person, fuck that boss moment. And there's something about the energy in those circumstances that is just so pure, of just like, oh, Ted was over there. Oh, fucking Ted, that asshole. Right? And you just get to see that, and it's so good. There's not like, that is the thing, like whenever I stop working, that is the thing I will miss the most about working, is those break time moments where you talk about that fucking dick, Ted or whoever is, oh God, you just get to have that like collective moment of fuck that guy. Ugh.
Misery loves company.
Yeah.
Outside of pitching for the week, what do you got recommended for people to watch this week?
Oh baby. Okay. So one of my friend and editor on my other podcast, Richard Ashford, was visiting me. It was great to see him. He is now a pilot boy. Congratulations, Richie. And we watched, I hadn't thought of it in forever, but for whatever reason, I think it like maybe popped up on Hulu or what have you to like casually watch, was Dirk Gently, Holistic Detective. I don't know. I don't think you've seen that, right?
I have mixed feelings about this show.
Well, go fuck yourself, because I think this show is amazing. This is one of my favorite shows of all time.
I love to hate it.
Well, you're wrong.
The truth is, the show is good.
The show slaps so hard. Do not listen to my co-host. This show is so cool and so fucking weird. It is the best.
It is absolutely bananas bonkers. I do a million% agree. It is bananas 100%. Bonkers with good chemistry.
Yeah, great chemistry, good writing. I cannot recommend the show great enough. This is Elijah Wood having amazing fun, being the most normal character in the show by a lot.
By country mile.
Yeah, oh my gosh. The show is just, it's the best parts of everything and the weirdest parts of everything else.
I know what drives me nuts about it, and it's the sense that it's all just gonna happen, and I hate it.
You don't enjoy the idea of fatalism or the universe or anything like that, and that is this show to a T.
It's not the universe. It's fucking predestination. Kick rocks.
Whatever.
I will die on this hill.
Sure. I mean, it's sort of both. There's a lot of the universe. Like, there are two characters that are driven by the power of the universe in a not so starshipy sort of way that just kind of came across as. That they are, they follow, it, where Moby Dick followed. I'm just going to fuck with this one now. Moby Dick followed the North Star, except Moby Dick is the whale.
Captain Ahab followed the white whale, yeah.
Yeah, they follow X is like there are two characters in the show that are, one of them is a detective and one of them is an assassin, and they both do the universe's bidding. Basically, they are kind of drawn
They're
to do
impulsive sociopaths.
Yeah, it's such a fiction. Look, man, you got to learn to set down your hatred of what has been foretold and just accept it. But if you want to set your brain down and just let shit be wild, I would recommend that, because it is butternutters.
It's absolutely nutty. It is good. It's my own personal hang-ups, which is why I'm like I want.
So don't listen to player 2.
Listen
to player 1.
Listen to player 1.
Go watch the show.
He's right.
Yes.
That's
oh,
good.
Mate, clip that shit. Woo!
Yeah, don't soundboard that and just insert it ad nauseum.
It's gonna be the outro. It's just a musicified version of you saying player 1 is right. Woo!
It's gonna be auto-tuned.
Anyway. All right. Player 2, what you reckon this week?
I am going not nearly as happy. I am repping an anime I've been watching that actually just wrapped up called 86. Which is it's dark. It's very gritty. Mech wartime, anime, Japan, everything goes wrong. Basically a country is using people that it deems 86, so not the super whites. They're literally called the Albas, like for albinism. They make them do their fighting, which I also find hilarious, because if you 86 someone, you kick them out of a building.
I was gonna say, yeah, I don't know about in other occupations, but in 86, where I've worked in the casino industry since I was under 21, 86 is when you kick somebody out for some amount of time, usually at least a day, if not a month.
I think that code is pretty common for most things, honestly.
Yeah, I do believe that is. But I was going to comment on that if you did.
Yeah,
so.
which I think that was, if that wasn't intentional, how?
Yeah, that if that one's not intentional, serendipity is just truly a force of nature.
Yeah,
that's bananas if that wasn't intentional.
Yeah. So using basically impoverished masses to do the warfare of the elite. And it goes.
Sound like any place you've been to.
Yeah, but it goes some places that it has. I kind of wrote it off towards the end of the first season, because I'm like, where does this go? I think it just kind of ends, and it actually went where I did not expect at all for the second season. Jesus Christ, it gets darker. It has some super dark character study, especially of one guy. It's like, this is what war does to your brain. Have fun watching. It's like, oh God, why can't I look away? It's really good if you're into something pretty damn dark.
That's awesome. I love it when shows are able to do that, where they're able to, make it work, but also find the line that you didn't see. That is definitely one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah,
it's so often when you find the thing that nobody thought of, there's a reason nobody thought of it. It doesn't make a fucking lick of sense.
There are a few times it does the kind of classic anime, just kind of shit happens because, which I'm like, fine, you've earned this one. But it does a decent job being internally consistent. There's just a few moments where I'm like, bah. However, by and large, it's not afraid to kill characters, which I appreciate, because it gives a serious sense of mortality to the show.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's one of those kind of annoying things is when it's like, oh, it's post-apocalyptic, but the whole cast of 50 people lives. I'm like, how are we supposed to, feel weight when none of the characters seem to, when they're all just getting to live? It's like, I don't know, it definitely is hard to believe the mortality. Not you can't, though it does sound like, being hypocritical. It is possible to have post-apocalyptic shows that are fun, and I think that's fine. But when you're trying to imbue weight and kind of sadness to a show, but you have no character die, it's like, yeah, it'd be a lot easier if they did.
yeah, they're like, so some of the deaths are basically fridging people early, but it's kind of like you don't have that much time invested in, so it doesn't feel too bad. Some of them fucking hurt.
Yeah,
it's just like, I need ice cream.
They contacted George R.R. and they're like, all right, how do we really, really depress an audience? Yeah. Oh, I've got ways.
Yeah, and I think the harder part in a lot of the later chunk of the show is you're just watching a dude go insane, and he refuses to see it.
Yeah.
And, and a couple characters know they're like, he ain't right.
And it does ain't right.
And it does a pretty good job, just slowly showing it.
It's kind of cool. I wonder. So there was this. We have a mutual friend that was Eli's best man actually at his wedding, Captain Coco, who in talking when I lived in the same town with him and I was finishing up my degree. We at one point talked about how, I think we were talking about because this was during COVID, that we were talking about zombies and stuff like that, because I am of the opinion that hopefully COVID is the closest we'll have gotten to a zombie style outbreak.
Yeah.
Of, infected versus not infected, staying away, closing doors, yada, yada, yada. But in talking about that, and I think I was talking about how people would rather have, I remember talking to people, especially young, dumb kids such as myself, that would have, I would have preferred zombies, been kind of cool going around shotgun killing things. It's like, would you though? And talking with him about it, he brought up this idea in the military that is, you have people in action for X amount of time, and then you need to get them the fuck out, because there's a expiration date where people that have been in action too long, concurrently, it really starts to fuck with them, and they are not doing the cause any good. Obviously, this is not a circumstance that can be had by everybody. The United States turns out has a big army, so that's pretty easy for us to move people in and out, or easier. But countries for instance, at this time, the Ukraine, dealing with being invaded, everybody's on deck basically all the time, I would expect. I don't know that for a fact, but that does make a difference. And he was talking, Coco was talking about the ramifications that it dealt to the human person. And after X amount of days, you'll start not, you can tell the people that have been on the front line too long because they don't make sense. Conversationally, their sentences are out of order. It affects your brain. Is that something that they at all kind of were able to kind of do it, with the way you're talking about somebody going insane in the show? Is that something that they kind of deal with in this show at all?
Not exactly.
Okay.
And not like that. Probably because that'd be, I don't know how easy that would be to convey. Also that, but he loses grasp of who he is, and he loses a lot of control. It's at one point he could just back up, and he just keeps running forward, killing shit. Unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
Despite everyone screaming dude, what the fuck are you doing? They have to shoot at him at one point to get him to wake the fuck back up.
Jesus.
Yeah, just what the fuck is wrong with you?
Well, to
Just
take us
delightful.
close. Yeah, take us back to a little bit more delightful territory before we end this. I've got a musical rec this week that I have sent to a certain co-host who hasn't listened to it yet. Not pointing any fingers, but
I feel like that's a lie.
my musical rec this week is Parallel Timeline by Slow Thrust. It came out a couple months ago. The band is I don't know how to pronounce this band's name correctly. The spelling is Slothrust. So I call it Slow Thrust. I don't know. Anyway, should see a show of theirs live just to know how they pronounce the band's name. I really enjoyed the band before this. There's a couple of tunes that I loved, but this album has just got massive amounts of bangers, and I would highly recommend. It's a lot of fun. It's got some angst to it, a lot of good riffs, and just all over a good time. And speaking of good times, this is the end of our good time together. So thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe.
and don't forget the new episodes of Super Pros come out the first and third Saturday of every month.
Bye. Nailed it. That was synchronous. Synchronous sound.